And we take these animals, these high-risk cattle, out of sale barns, or they're just weaned or trucked between states. And this cortisol surge thing starts. Okay, it's like a wiffle ball bat smacking the side of a hornet's nest. The animal has no control. This isn't a dimmer switch. This is an on-off switch. So you hit it, it's like the Incredible Hulk. It just takes off and it's on for 21 days. So we bring these animals inbound, and even though we have a lot of astute cattle people in our industry, the animal has had a million years to find out how to hide that. Okay, so the first 2 weeks or so on these at-risk inbound cattle, it's really hard to find them when you can actually do them some good. You know, a lot of times we don't find them until out in that third week, when the cortisol is starting to subside from the cell signaling getting fatigued. And by then, we've got major problems, got major issues going on.
Hi, I'm Dr. AJ Tarpoff from Kansas State University. I'm the Beef Extension Veterinarian. And today I'd like to welcome you all to the Beef Podcast Show, brought to you by Wise Networks. This program is dedicated to bring you the latest insights and discussion from the cattle industry, so get ready to expand your knowledge and have a great conversation. So today with us, this will be a great program. I'm really excited for this conversation, but with us today, Dr. Blaine Ellison. So Dr. Ellison is the president of Applied Biotechnologies, and correct me if I get anything incorrect, but Dr. Ellison did his pre-professional work at Iowa State University, then went next door to University of Illinois for his veterinary medicine work and graduated in 1980. He started doing nutrition work with the CPM dairy model in 1989, practiced in a 7-partner dairy practice until 1995, and had a client base of over 50,000. After leaving practice, Dr. Ellison worked in technical service for the dairy industry, both domestically and abroad. And in 2001, became a dairy nutritional consultant and worked with herds from South Florida, which is very different than Upper Midwest, but has been able to work with both areas. He worked in tech service support and product research for over 30 years, speaks internationally, and has taught the model nutrition in numerous countries. But really, we're going to focus on the past 5 years, where he's focused on the cortisol surge of high-risk dairy and beef cattle. And just prior to the podcast, we had this discussion, but we had talking about this cortisol surge, which is pretty exciting. Dr. Ellison, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, so I guess to begin with, you've had a breadth of experience within the cattle industry, both on the dairy, both on the beef, both in private industry as well as private practice. Tell us a little bit about how you came to us today in your journey.
Okay, the reason my company is called Applied Biotechnology, I think the way we help our clients is identify technologies that have merit and then try to apply them in a way that lends value to our clients. I think a lot of times we try to put a round peg in a square hole. Some piece of distracted science gets identified. Now we need to find out what that's going to cure or what that's going to help. I think sometimes you have to have a more cohesive fit. And when you can put those together, when you can get the right science together with the right causal thing it's trying to solve, you can have some pretty amazing success.
Tired of the 21-day shot show? Stop hitting the cortisol hornet's nest with a wiffle ball bat every time you wean, transport, commingle, do shoot work, or experience Mother Nature's mood swings with weather. The cortisol surge can't be stopped, but it can be proactively controlled. QFA 2000 is a proactive approach to reducing the risk of BRD in calves. QFA 2000 reduces the use of antimicrobials, improves innate immune function, and allows the calf to do what it's meant to do, efficiently gain weight. For less than half the cost of antimicrobials, you can take a proactive, hands-off approach with your calves. Control the 21-day cortisol surge and control your drug costs with QFA 2000. For more information, contact us at applied-biotechnologies.com.
I think that's well said. Well said. And, well, I guess without I kind of alluded to it. What is the 21-day cortisol surge in cattle, and where did that come from?
All right, so to know where we're headed, we got to know where we came from. And all the beef and dairy cattle in the northern hemisphere came from this ancient animal called the wild ox. And this animal was 6 to 7 feet at the shoulder, weighed 3,000 pounds, and was a phenomenal athlete. And Julius Caesar, actually, in some of his orations, alluded to the auroch, in that whenever identified an enemy, whether that was a human or some predator, it was not reticent to get out there and take care of it. The aurochs on a lot of cave paintings throughout Europe and Asia. A lot of lore or reverence to this animal because of what it had, and that's probably why 10 to 15,000 years ago they decided, for better or worse, this was going to be the animal. Okay, so this animal was belligerent not only to other outsiders, but was belligerent to their own herd members. So if a member would get ill or infirm, they would just usher it to the back and let the predators take care of it. Well, over time, that was a no-win situation. So they evolved from the flight or fight hormone, the transient cortisol thing. They embellished that with cell signaling to last for 21 days. And so the animal then either got better or died. It's gonna die anyway if they put it in the back. So at least bought it a few weeks. Okay, so at the same time that the cortisol surge gets triggered, the animal also evolved the ability to take its immune function and change its diet, if you will, from ketone bodies from fat metabolism over to the blood glucose, because the cortisol is making all kinds of blood glucose. So that made a lot of sense. They weren't making milk for a human. They weren't gaining weight for a carcass for a human. And so that made a lot of sense. So you fast forward to today, and we take these animals, these high-risk cattle, out of sale barns, or they're just weaned or trucked between states. And this cortisol surge thing starts. Okay, it's like a wiffle ball bat smacking the side of a hornet's nest. The animal has no control. This isn't a dimmer switch. This is an on-off switch. So you hit it, it's like the Incredible Hulk. It just takes off and it's on for 21 days. So we bring these animals inbound, and even though we have a lot of astute cattle people in our industry, the animal has had 1,000,000 years to find out how to hide that. Okay, so the first 2 weeks or so on these at-risk inbound cattle, it's really hard to find them when you can actually do them some good. A lot of times we don't find them until out in that third week, when the cortisol is starting to subside from the cell signaling getting fatigued. And by then, we've got major problems, got major issues going on. And a lot of those animals at that point are irretrievable or take multiple redosing. And we've lost efficiency in the animal. And we've been doing this for 30, 40 years. And I saw this happening. Well, I've been ringside for 45 years. I've seen this happening, and I go, somebody needs to maybe try and do something about this. So about a little more than 5 years ago, we started in the private sector and started working on, first of all, identifying what the cortisol surge is. A lot of people say the word cortisol surge because that's the new sexy buzzword. But not many people know where it came from. They don't know what it does. They don't know why it is happening. And so the beginning was to identify what the pinch point was going to be in these stressed cattle. And then from there, we went off and measured cell surface antigens to help us tell if we were doing any good, if we were getting things together that were going to help pull the plug on this redundant 21-day cell signaling that keeps them under this high cortisol level.
Now, are there differences between animals on that 21-day cycle? I mean, most of the biologic world, we call it the bell-shaped curve. Some animals have a much shorter, some have a little bit longer. Or is this 21 days pretty consistent between animal to animal, group to group?
Well, we've changed the paint job, but we haven't changed the chassis on the Ferrari, right? And so the animal, this knee-jerk 21-day thing is really, really there. Now, some animals, if they were weaned and kept on site for 45 days, let's say, and then went out into channels, that animal obviously has a better chance of having a smaller peak. It's still going to have a cortisol surge thing happen to it, but it might not be the same as if we take one out of Western Virginia, and the first time they see a human is when it gets put on a truck and ripped away from its cow and gets sent out here to the Midwest, comes off the trailer climbing the walls. Okay, so you see a lot of that. There's a lot of spectrum there. And Temple Grandin did a lot of work initially on behavior patterns and trying to correlate some of the whorl positioning on the forehead to try and correlate between that and how high the frantic level or wild level might get. The knowledge base wasn't there back then, but I think we have the opportunity to build on some of her early work to try and progress what we know now about the cortisol surge and this immune function thing when we're changing it over to blood glucose. We get these inbound animals, and typically they don't gain or they may actually lose some weight in the first 3 weeks. That's because this immune function is scavenging the blood glucose, which would be better used and partitioned to weight gain in what we've done with the animal. And what we found is that if you can short circuit this cortisol surge in that first day or two when they're inbound, those animals continue to gain at whatever level they were gaining at before they went into the circuit. So it might be 2 pounds a day. Some might be a little more than 3 a day. It has more to do with what their previous nutritional experience was before they hit the circuit, and became your inbound cattle, than specifically what's going on today at your farm. But they will gain when they're not consuming this. So some researchers have called this inflammation, and I don't want to get bogged down in the weeds there. Whether you call this inflammation or inappropriate scavenging of the blood glucose resource, I think we can agree there's better uses for blood glucose in our modern animal, whether it's beef or dairy, than to let that go off and be worthlessly, consumed, to kind of feed hungry immune function during this stress period.
And I mean, this is we've been feeding cattle for a long time. We see morbidity rates have not changed; they've gone up. We've had increased death losses. We have not tackled and really solved the root problem. But your area, you've really been diving into. Can we short circuit? Can we better utilize those resources? Energy, glucose. Can we bypass some of that prolonged triggering and make it for good rather than having that, kind of fight or flight all the way to the death, rather than, hey, let's save this valuable animal. Let's utilize the resources that we're feeding it, and let's make some more, meat, milk, bone, whatever that might be of whatever its destiny is. So that's interesting because we really haven't solved that problem yet.
Well, when we were in the research phase, we had some early results where our sites would say, like, this stuff is worthless. Stuff doesn't work because the control animals are the healthy ones and your fed animals are the sick ones. Okay, so it took a while to unwrap. What it turns out is that if you can peel back that onion skin of this cortisol surge, at day 14, having come inbound, that animal hasn't gone to college for an advanced degree, but it knows in 1 more week there's going to be hell to pay, and it better be saving its blood glucose for the immune system. So what these animals do is, if they're on a product that does this, at 14 days they stand back from the feed bunk. They're not off feed, they're down regulating their GI tract consumption of glucose. And you tempt these animals, or you put a stethoscope to them, and there's nothing going on. They might at most have a low-grade fever. They got no consolidation. That's coming in 7 more days if we don't find them. And so we find them. We give them one treatment. We put a chalk mark on. We don't even put them in a sick pen because tomorrow they're going to be there eating, or this afternoon they're going to be there eating. But for an old veterinarian to think about an animal that stands back from feed and is not sick, quote, off feed, that was a hard realization. That was a hard code to crack. But when we finally got through that, it happens really consistently. When you get rid of this cortisol surge at that 13 to 15 day window, these animals will just stand back from the bunk. Their ears aren't down, they just ain't eating today. And what it is, they're down regulating glucose use because they can't do that with their nervous system. And the second most consumption comes out of the GI tract. So they down regulate by reducing intake to start saving glucose for what's happening in 7 more days.
Now, just out of curiosity, are these spikes, do they only happen once, or is it any big stressful event can kind of restart this cascade? I'm thinking, if a blizzard comes in, we have to restart cattle on feed. If we have, some big pen disruption where we have a social interaction issue, can we inadvertently restart this 21-day cycle even after an animal's been on feed, after we've been, arrival to a facility?
Yeah, we get out the elastrator, or we get out the implant gun. Those are really wiffle ball bats. And so how many wiffle ball bats do we want to smack the hornet's nest with on any one given day? We've taken our customer base, and sometimes you get that early snow. Like we already had a 2-inch snow here in Wisconsin. It's going to be 60 tomorrow. So, November can be a challenging month. But what we'll do going into a storm, if we know it's coming, is we'll put animals on the product and prevent this. And maybe they're only going to be on for 5 to 7 days this time, right? Because if we know it's coming and we get them on before the hornets leave the wasp nest, it can be a shorter duration.
Which that's always the goal, right? Is shortening the duration, having that stop check. And you've alluded to this a couple times, some of the work and some of the product development you all have done, and talk a little bit more about this product. It's QFA, correct?
Yes, quality feed additive.
So talk a little bit about what it is, how you got here, and how it interacts with that cortisol spike, and kind of how you guys developed this.
A lot of blood work and cell antigen columns later, you start to figure out what might be working. Okay, so this gets into biopolymers. Okay, so if you take hyaluronic acid and you snap enough of them together, at some point they become a cell whisperer, and they actually become a cell signaling entity on their own. Okay, so if you can find the right hyaluronic acid, and what I tell people is after COVID, what happened was you heard a lot of like designer cancer treatment, or therapies are targeted towards breast cancer or prostate cancer. So what I did is I went out and I dusted off the one that was for respiratory. So we took the howitzer from the tank because BRD is our big disease, and we pointed the howitzer on the tank at the respiratory system. Not that the immune system's giving up on the rest of the body, but it's focusing in on that. And those ideas came out of human research. They certainly weren't unique for us. We just applied them. Applied the biotechnology.
So you're creating kind of it's not creating, but it's utilize almost a special messenger to be able down at the cellular level. That's a linked chain of hyaluronic acids that can interact with cell signaling to be able to change some of these outcomes of cortisol spike and glucose. Making sure that glucose is available for the steer or the heifer and not the immune system.
The other thing is that the animal, if we bring them inbound and off the truck, we shoot them with a vaccination. Okay, the odds of that being really helpful 3 weeks from now is a bit remote. I mean, if you read the little package insert, it doesn't say for best results, only used during the height of the cortisol surge on at-risk cattle. It doesn't say that. But we do that because it's handy, and we do it because, we're sure they're going to die if we don't do that. Well, the vaccine you give today doesn't trigger protective immunity for at least 3 weeks, right? On a good day. And so if we're going to keep these animals healthy in this time frame, when they're at-risk inbound cattle, we have to work on their innate immunity. It's what they came with. Okay, and so that's talking about tight junctions. That's talking about tethered mucus to help hold mucus over the epithelium so that the viruses which initiate the infection after stress, that we can stall those off. So when you run in your castle, when you come off the moat and you run in your castle and you pull up the gate, okay, we want a railroad tie, not a treated 2x4 in the brackets behind the door. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help fortify what the animal already has naturally. And when you get rid of the cortisol surge and you help the innate immune function of the animal, it's amazing how resilient and robust they are.
Well, it's just giving them the opportunity to thrive, right?
Yeah.
And compounded stressors. And in feedlot practice, we used to talk about this all the time. The compounded stressors that we inadvertently put on top of these poor animals, and then we pull them in and knowingly, hey, we're going to utilize vaccines. We're going to do some of these things, and unfortunately, that's another challenge. I always work with my students and making sure they understand a vaccine is a challenge to the immune system. It's a tool in the toolbox. Are we using it at the right time? Are we getting the benefit out of it? Yeah.
And what I talk to producers about is, we use a respiratory vaccine, and the bacteria in those vaccines have endotoxins, which are pretty wicked. And we'll pair that up, we'll pancake that up with a Clostridium vaccination at the same time. Okay, so opposite sides of the neck does not count for spacing out vaccinations and the stacking of these toxins that we inadvertently put on these animals. And I get it again. I get that we got this labor efficiency thing going on. And, maybe some guys have an idea that we are taking the wiffle ball bat and whipping on the hornet's nest. But, maybe at some point we don't need to use a Clostridium vaccine on that given day. A lot of the Clostridium issues happen at the higher weights when the animals are finishing. And most of the research on Clostridium is somewhere between 6 and 8 month protection. So if we're putting 4 and 5 weights and we're giving them a Clostridium, and we'll booster them in a month, that's still only 6 to 8 months. That's as good as the antigenicity is. And so it might be better off to do that when those animals are more like 7, 8 weights, that are approaching going off on full feed, and not squandering some of that protection potentially at a lower weight where they're not as challenged for Clostridium infections.
No, it makes sense. Now, talk a little bit more about QFA. I guess you talked a little bit about the development, but what is it?
Okay, so QFA is a 1/10 pound feed rate that we use for 21 days. We advise using them top dress for the first 3 days, because when animals are first inbound, a lot of times they're not aware where the bunk is or anything like that. And so we'll top dress for the first 3 days and finish out to day 21 with QFA. Being an old nutritionist, made a 10th pound feed rate, so we're not disrupting any nutritional things going on anywhere, whether dairy or beef. And because it's a nutritional additive, we're not having to take out a wiffle ball bat and put them through the chute and whack on the wasp nests again, right? They don't even know that we're treating them. So the QFA is working on that cell signaling. The QFA is working on this innate immune function bolstering. QFA also has 1.5 billion colony forming units of a probiotic bacteria blend. And I always talk about that last, because if you think QFA is a probiotic, then you're missing the boat. This is really more of a frosting on the cupcake, or the cherry on top of the frosting on the cupcake. And I thought, 1.5 billion, that's a lot of bug. But, some of these cattle already have antibiotic exposure. A lot of these animals aren't really eating well. And, the rumen on these animals is fine. We haven't done anything to the rumen with this stress with it. They just quit eating during their transportation. But as soon as that animal gets back on feed, the rumen starts working. But under stress, what we do is we totally we erase the blackboard of the intestinal tract. And it's our opportunity to reinfect, if you will, or refaunate with bacteria that are going to be helpful to the animal, not be bacteria that are going to be across purposes to the animal.
Well, and back to the transportation and all of that, I'm sure dehydration has something to do with that. So
yes,
and that kind of the re-jump starting, right?
Yep, dehydrate. We have a plan. We use electrolytes along with QFA for the first 3 days or whatever. Now, the interesting thing about dehydration, it doesn't fit into this pack of things that trigger cortisol surge because it's a man-made artifact. Left to itself, an animal that hasn't been confined in a trailer or hasn't been gone to a sale barn where the waters are frozen up or turned off or whatever happens along the way, all these dehydration events are human artifacts. Okay, so the animal didn't evolve a response to that. But now we have dehydration along with cortisol surge. It certainly behooves us to go ahead and address those needs from an electrolyte standpoint. And if you're using nasal vaccines, when you read the insert on your nasal vaccine, for best results, only give to dehydrated animals whose mucus coating of their membranes are not optimal. So you're not going to spread out the antigens of your nasal vaccine as well as we might intend when we did the research. And so, it all kind of fits together. And there's just that little asterisk with the dehydrations that's something that we cooked up for animals when they were a deer out in the woods where we locked them up and started screwing with them. There wasn't dehydration, right? If it wasn't raining, they migrated.
I guess back to the bunk, the top dress. Do you guys see any differences in intake or willingness to go to the bunk?
Yes, in my work in tech service, I was tasked with inventing a flavor. Okay, so I didn't write that in. I mean, there's only so much you can write in the back of the business card, right? So, but luckily, I got to my flavor guys before they all started retiring because we're all getting to that tender age anymore. And a lot of mills use like a cherry berry, use some kind of fruity extract. Okay, that works great once the animal eats it and goes, hey, that didn't taste too bad. Well, our flavor has 26 analogs, kind of like talking about wines with, finish and a middle and all that. But anyway, there's aromatics. And, without getting into it, if you use esters correctly, esters don't aggregate, esters don't group, so they volatilize a little easier. So if you pick some esters that are attractive to the animal, and so maybe we would interpret them as buttery. They're going to be butyric analogs. And then there's going to be some analogs that are milky. And it's kind of challenging as a human with our limited capacity to sense the world, what cattle actually sense. But when you have an aromatic component to it actually attracts them to the bunk. And we have movies where you top dress this and the animals actually come to the bunk. They come to see this stuff. So there's the flavor is in every ton of QFA, and it's the real deal.
Interesting. So the formulation, you have a top dress. Do you also have something to use with like a micro machine or anything along those lines?
We have fed QFA into like Lely robotic milk feeders, gang feeders, or we call that. And so, we have a dose for that. If you had a farm, like if you had this kind of like bleeding off into dairy, but if you had a farm that was getting corona rotavirus at 10 days, right? If you know that's coming on this given farm, and a lot of the big farms just can't shake it. It's no wonder why COVID vaccine was challenging because, in the years that COVID has been out there, we haven't made any advances with the corona phase of what goes on in cattle. But if you can use some QFA in the milk for like starting at day 4 or 5, and fortify that innate immunity to like fortify those tight junctions between the enterocytes and get the mucus, fit as it can be. You got a chance to take the blunt edge on that corona rotavirus scour at 10 days.
Well, just from the point of protecting energy, immune function. I mean, so if I had this right, you have a product that helps support the immune system and cell signaling and I guess brings and restore order of glucose use. And then, but you've also got some probiotics and an aroma that obviously sick cattle, we struggle with them eating. So all three of these working together is kind of the product that y'all have brought to market.
So do you have patience for one more benefit?
Sure. No, yeah, because we haven't even gotten into the overall like the true like returns and outcomes. So yeah, by all means.
Okay, so we had producers out east, kind of in that Virginia area code, and they called up and they said, you know what, when we're on QFA, chlortetracycline or Oreo actually works again. And I didn't see that coming. But what turns out what QFA does is it takes the porin, the pore structure in the bacteria, and we jam a shop rag in that carburetor. Okay, so that changes the osmotics on the cell, makes it salty inside. Okay, it turns out the cell can either deal with the saltiness that we've caused with a mechanical obstruction, or else it can work on chewing up Draxxin and laughing at that today, but can't do both. And so this is kind of like when amoxicillin got tired, they put clavicilic acid and made Clavamox. Well, QFA tetracycline, that doesn't roll off the tongue, but it actually works, and there's no reroute by the bacteria because we didn't change metabolism. We did a physical obstruction to the pore structure. And it turns out both gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria have this similar structure. So it works on both kinds. And makes injectable antibiotics work better, and it sure makes chlortetracycline work better.
And just to clarify, so this product, there's no withdrawal or anything like that, and you don't need any special. It can be used with or without ionophores, different types of coccidiostats, in feeding.
No contraindication of anything that's going to get in the way of the love of QFA.
So we've talked about the product, how it came, what it does, kind of what it interacts with. But the big question really that, I know I always get from producers, what's in it for me, right? What's,
Absolutely.
Sure, it might be able to do that in a lab or in a trial, but what's the return on investment? And I guess that would be my next question is kind of what are the paybacks?
Okay, so if your inbound cattle come in and instead of standing still or going backwards in those first 3 weeks, they started gaining even at 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds a day, about 2 pounds of gain for 2 days pays for the whole 21 days of QFA, right? At today's prices. And it's a no-brainer. I mean, they're going to gain if they're on QFA and you peel off this cortisol surge and kick the immune system back on its correct diet. The blood glucose then gets allocated the way that we groomed these animals for 10,000 years. Okay, so that's one payback. The other payback, which we've had like 3 years, starting into 4th year here, we seem to get about 75% less antibiotic use / treatments on animals that get QFA put on them coming inbound. Now, what we did find is if you wait till the end of the first week, what happens is there's enough imprinting on this cell signaling mechanism. It's kind of like if you move a sofa to the other side of the living room, you still know where that sofa was because there's a dent in your carpet. Well, you kind of make a dent in the cell signaling pathway, and we do help, but it's nothing like if you can get it into them on that first day or so when they come off inbound cattle. That's our golden window of opportunity.
Well, I I've got to ask, is there any way to like bolus it to those animals prior to them leaving?
Yeah, the the the, the logical extension of this, okay, is if you have inbound animals and you know your source, put them on for 2 or 3 days before they leave, and then finish up for the last 18 days at your place. So in Ohio, we got a sale barn. They've gone through some tough patch of cattle just lately, and producers that are patrons of this sale barn aren't having like a Disney day, right? The Skittles and the Unicorn have left their facilities. So one of our customers out there, he goes to his pal who owns a sale barn and goes, "You need to get your guys on this stuff." And so the sale barn actually advised that the guys buying the cattle for this period of time, whatever's going on in the sale barn, to use QFA to smooth out the bumpy ride. Because that doesn't do your sale barn any good if guys go home and start filling up a hole with these calves when they get them home. That's no good. And so we've progressed to that point, and part of the reason we decided to become podcasters, me at the tender age I am as a boomer, is because the only thing seems to be limiting us is people understanding that this is actually a thing. We have like 98% return client base, and if you go through one group of cattle, you'll understand the deal.
Well, I guess where would somebody find it? Where like how do they? I guess where can you be found?
Okay, so I'm in southern Wisconsin, and there's 20,000 doses in a ton. Okay, so it's not hard to get shipped around.
Nice.
Our new website is coming on board. By the time this podcast comes out, it'll be up, and it's called Applied-Biotechnologies.com, and you'll get to us through that.
No, fair enough. No, but that's because it's an interesting product. It's we're just I think you're at the forefront of a lot of there's so many more things that we don't understand about the immune system, the immune function, cell interactions. I mean, we think we know everything about, it's like, oh, I learned that in school. We are not even getting close to the real interactions within the body, how we can help support the animal, because it doesn't matter what antibiotic we use, what vaccines we've used, if that immune system, the immune system is the real success story.
Absolutely.
We support the immune system any way we can, and if we're not doing our job for that, the animal's not going to get better.
Well, we had a herd over by the river by Iowa in a town called Boscobel, and they brought in 350 beef on dairies at like 3.5 weights out of Indiana. So that's like 10.5 hour truck ride. They were supposed to be pre-vaccinated, so we're good to go. Cattle show up. Turns out no vaccination. Money was paid, no vaccination. But they were on QFA, and they ended up giving 6 single treatments to 350 3 weights that drove 10 hours for 21 days. It isn't about the vaccine. It's like you said, it's about the immune function. It's about fortifying this innate immunity, making them like the Army, all you can be, for that first few weeks while we're buying time and getting them on their feet.
Well, I think it's all the pieces of it, right? It's husbandry, it's nutrition, supporting the immune system, understanding the immune system, and the stressors that are happening. I mean, it's fun to talk about all the way back to history, why our cattle go through that stress, the herd mentality, the protectionism. I mean, we're here for a reason, right?
Right. And you look at the Spanish fighting cattle, fighting bulls, and you look at what we've done with rodeo bulls. That's just a smidgen of what this animal was back in the day, and they were bad guys. They must have taken babies. I tell Suzanne, I go, they must have taken babies because, how many guys with sharp pointed sticks would it take to get adults inside a corral somewhere? You must have had to go out there and steal some babies in the dead of night to get this thing started.
Oh, Dr. Ellison, this is excellent, and appreciate the information on the immune system, your product, your contact, kind of where you've been working at in the industry. And I think we're getting right to the end of our time, but I can't let you go yet because as a part of the Beef Podcast Show, we always ask folks three separate questions. We talked a little bit about this prior to, but I've got to wrap up with these last three questions unless you have anything else to add.
No, probably said too much already.
It's time for our famous three.
Okay, so number one, you're a respected individual within the industry, but obviously we've talked about it. We don't know everything. It's continuous learning. What is your favorite go-to cattle-related resource that you learn from?
Like we were talking, ADSA, the Dairy Science Organization. Every month, the peer-reviewed papers come out in different categories. And I gotta say, I don't read the cheese one every month, or the food ones, but I do go through the metabolic ones and what's going on in cattle. And I mean, we really have a struggle anymore because federal and state funding have gone away. And what happens is there isn't a lot of base research of finding the secrets to life anymore. What it is, companies come in with a sack of money and they go, we got product XYZ, and we want you to do this trial that proves that product XYZ is the greatest stuff since sliced bread. Well, that is research, but that isn't propelling our understanding potentially of the animal and the metabolic quirks that if we understood the rules. I tell people that we probably aren't going to appreciate all the rules that cattle have. And, we could, if we were in a perfect place, we would choose other rules. But the number one rule is that the cattle never change the rules. So if we can understand the rules, we can win the game almost every time. So whether it's going to be frustration and hitting our head on the wall, or maybe making a little more money in our checkbook, the choices, I think, are largely up to us.
No, it's good, but I think you're spot on. There's so much more we have yet to learn. And I hope, we never stop learning, and I hope we never stop learning, and we always have the avenues to be able to continue to learn for science, for the industry, to better understand and care for the animals. I think that's spot on.
Oh, I was going to say the knowledge that went into the research and product development of this product that we're calling QFA, that knowledge wasn't even known when I graduated vet school back in 1980. This has all happened since. And so part of being a good consultant, which I might be jumping ahead, part of being a good consultant is keeping up in your field.
And we do it by continually learning, talking, interacting, reading.
Absolutely. And if you find yourself being the smartest person in the room too often, you need to find a new room because you're not experiencing personal growth. You need to go out somewhere and start learning something from a better crowd.
Indeed. Okay, so question number two. I tweaked this one a little bit. Usually I ask about a favorite book or resource outside of agriculture, but I'm going to tweak this one for you after we've been talking. What is your, agriculture is your life. What do you do to divert yourself and relax whenever you go home?
Right. Well, I don't have a power boat. I don't play golf, but I do have a koi pond in my backyard that has like 65 or so goldfish and koi in it. And when the cattle world gets me down, I go out there in the afternoon and sit out there and watch the fish. And it helps me with my own cortisol surge.
See, there you go. It's good to always have that relaxing area that you can unwind. I applaud you for that. Okay, so number three. You've been around the industry for a long time. You've interacted with a lot of people. I'm sure you've had mentors. I know I have my mentors, people I look up to. What makes both a successful person in agriculture as well as a successful leader that people will look up to and follow?
Okay, like I was telling you earlier, I think it goes back to what your mom taught you as a little kid. Tell people when you don't know. Don't lie, and if you don't know, say you don't know. And go out and find the answer, hook them up with someone who's more versed in that specific area because no one knows it all. There's people who have their areas of of concentration. And that's why it's important to have a network, I think. Like find somebody who's great at this or that, and you put your skills together, and the phone, sometimes they're calling to reach out to you, and other times you're calling to reach out to them. Whether that's in bacteriology or in animal husbandry. I mean, and listen to your clients. I mean, I've learned a lot from my clients over the years. I'm still learning stuff from my clients. They're the guys that are there at the animals every day. And, there's a lot that you can learn from these astute cattle guys we got in our industry.
I agree 100%. I've learned so much I've probably learned more from feedlot cowboys than I have, in a classroom. But with that, Dr. Blaine Ellison, thank you so much for coming on the Beef Podcast Show today.
Hey, I've really appreciated it and had a good time.
For those listening in, again, this has been the Beef Podcast Show. I'm Dr. AJ Tarpoff. This was Dr. Blaine Ellison with Applied Biotechnologies. This has been a great information session. Thank you, and tune in next time for another great Beef Podcast Show.